I have alluded in an earlier video on TechRaptor that I, Sean Joy, aka Dragnix, am a scientist at my core. I'm the kind of person who makes a hypothesis and attempts to collect data in an unbiased way in order to support its conclusion. Now, several people may have called me a mad scientist, of course, and that's a matter of opinion, of course. However, if the data that I find doesn't support the hypothesis in any sort of way, I change my position. That's how true science works. Let the data show exactly what the opinion and the conclusion should be. Now look, that itself can be tricky. Sets of data can be looked at in various different ways, and in addition to that, interpreted incorrectly to see a trend that's actually not there. However, one would hope that with enough data and enough information about the experiment in question, that one doesn't push an idea forward despite the data saying the contrary. Or even worse, manipulate the data to support an opinion that may not be as strong as you first thought. Writing, on the other hand, at times can be more of an art form, but there's still a definite science to certain types of pieces, especially when those pieces have conclusions that are made, or opinions that are reached based on a set of data. Brian Crecente, or Brian C as I'm going to call him for the rest of this video in case I got that pronunciation wrong, of Polygon recently wrote an article regarding the future of Nintendo and consoles that I've put in the description below. Now, I read as much as I can of other news outlets since I started doing some work at TechRaptor. Why? It's good to always get a variety of data and challenge yourself against thinking outside the box in terms of opinion pieces. But once in a while, an opinion piece gets under your skin for some reason. Sometimes it's on moral grounds. Sometimes it's an absurdity to what is being discussed. But for me, when opinion pieces get under my skin, it's those that are not supported by the data that they use, or make claims that can be easily contradicted in terms of evidence. You know, the scientist part of me? And with Brian's piece, let's just say my thoughts on the matter were, enhanced. Needless to say, this video is specifically a reaction to this piece in question, and my questioning of Mr. Crecente's use of information to prove his points. I'm not saying the man is a bad writer, nor questioning his character, not at all, but I'm indicating that the way he arrived to his conclusion and presenting his findings was a little bit flawed. I'll break down the article piece by piece and present evidence or another view on the situation in question to show how his conclusion could easily have gone a different direction and why it should have. Brian starts the piece by saying, "The home video game console, a dedicated machine designed specifically to bring video games into the home, is a stubbornly resilient thing of the past, a limiting anachronism that does much more harm to the gaming industry than it does good." I always want to look at the first and last paragraphs of an article, no matter where the major facts, details, and conflicts are. The first paragraph sets the tone of the article, how the writer is going about things, and for the rest of the article. It's pretty plain to see where Brian feels within the first paragraph with the uses of the stubborn, harm, limiting, and anachronism words. He's basically indicating that it's holding progress back, that it won't go away, and it's actually hurting the industry. It starts with very, very antagonistic opening, makes a declarative statement, and goes for the throat by indicating that the home gaming console is a thing of the past, by not asking a question, mind you. He set the tone. It's broken. It's out of touch. Alright, let's go into the details why he thinks so. Brian writes, "During an age when games can be played on smartphones, tablets, computers, calculators, watches, and just about any other device with silicone in it, having something that sits under your television so you can play games at home is not just unnecessary, it's wasteful." Alright, I already have a problem with this line, specifically with the wasteful line. First of all, let's think about the point he's made here. The same silicone that is present in all those devices he names off can be applied to the console. But he's making a point that the additional device that is unneeded being the console itself. But he also makes another point later on, that it's just the point of the console to play games at home, implying that the device only has a singular use. But Mr. Crecente fails to understand the strength of having a dedicated device in question, and for the console's sake, it's good for get-togethers, accessibility, and local multiplayer. The same argument about wastefulness can be applied to the watch, for example, when you have a phone that can easily tell the time. The fact is the watch serves a single purpose, just like the console serves a specific purpose. You see, there's simplicity in consoles due to the idea of being relatively easy to set up and easy to pick up. While those technical out there have no problem going through and setting up a PC on a big screen, downloading all the drivers and optimizing it appropriately, not everybody is technically literate like that. It's easy to pop and play, as one would say. Some people have very busy lives. I myself, when I was a software engineer, preferred consoles. Why? Mostly because it was just so convenient. I just didn't have the time otherwise. Lives in which convenience and simplicity is the higher need than functionality. In those cases, a console makes more sense, especially given the one-time cost for setup. Sure, a PC can do that too, of course, but as mentioned, different games have a different set of options, drivers, and software needed, to the point where optimizing it or making it work may take some time. In addition, later on in the article he talks about the NX as a service rather than it being in a console. But here's the thing. If it's a service, then you have different variants of that service on different hardware and different platforms. That leads to variance. And the thing is, there is something to say about consoles where you pick up the same controller and have the same menus. There is some convenience to that, so that a friend who's used to that setup can easily get in and play as well as you can. But let's also think about the local multiplayer aspect, which is still the greatest strength that the console has. Look, I'm not saying the PCs don't have it either, but when you think about what supports local multiplayer a majority of the time, it's the consoles. There's a reason why Mario Kart 8 sold a lot of Wii U units. That getting together in the same rooms with buddies and just causing chaos with each other is just plain fun. Sure, you can get a little bit of the same feeling online, but there's a different sense to being in the same room as someone else, looking at the same console and just goofing off. Social interaction is a huge element for console gamers at times, and while some elements in tablets and smartphones that allow for local multiplayer are present, a majority of games and apps don't really allow for it without an online component for it. Now, one can argue that Mr. Crecente's proposed solution later on in the article can handle that, but that's the thing. The service portion of it means a reliance on servers and uptimes for those servers. Some people don't have the internet connections and reasonable speed to rely on that. It's easier for those, especially in areas with very bad connections, to have a physical copy of something. A physical copy, like consoles need. Later in the article, Brian writes, "Development is still typically the most expensive part of releasing a new video game creation, but the licensing fee or royalties paid to any platform holder, Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony, remains a high cost of entry. This fee is one of the reasons indie development, which blossoms so easily on the personal computer and mobile, still lags behind on console, and that despite recent push by console makers to pull in more indies." I really want to focus on this one because I hear this argument all the time. Now, there are some stats out there that are very, very misleading and a little bit out to date, and while there is at times increased cost depending on the console and everything around it, it's not as cut and dry as he says. More than ever, it's been easier to develop for the platform, in particular with the indie side. Considering the argument he is making with Nintendo, I'm going to focus on their side of it, but similar arguments can be made on the Microsoft and Sony side as well, so I want to dash this proposal once and for all. Let's take a look at the official Wii U developers page regarding indie titles that are trying to release on the Wii U shop. Let's take a look at specifically the question of how much does it cost to develop on the Wii U. Quoting the FAQ response, "It's free of charge to participate in the program and to submit games to Nintendo for technical certification. There is some cost involved for Wii U development hardware, but we run a program to help developers who are just getting started." So not only is the statement he made false in terms of indie programs in terms of high cost of entry, in fact, Nintendo is going about it so that it's easier than ever. And that cost that I referred to before, $2,500, based on the information provided by WarriorWorld.com in emails. Now note, this doesn't mean that they are ready to program, right? Not so fast. Remember that the Wii U supports Unity. That should be clear in terms of the Unity contract on the Wii U. That same engine that's used in a lot of PC games nowadays, in fact. Well, of course, there's a license cost that you'll have to... Oh, wait a minute. No, you don't. Nintendo pays the cost of the Unity license. That's right, Nintendo pays for the Unity license on the Wii U for all licensed Nintendo developers. Get licensed with them, and you're good to go. They even have their own web framework in terms of a development environment for those involved. So it seems cheaper than ever to develop as an indie title on the Wii U shop, which is part of the argument he had for the PC. Now, granted, there are costs, but is it that astronomical? Now, no, there's one major and vital component to his development cost portion that he does not take into account: hardware. And I don't mean the hardware you're developing with necessarily. What do I mean? There is something to be said about working on a set of hardware that is absolutely known at the time of development. Remember, on a PC you do have multiple choice of multiple devices: AMD and Intel processors, AMD versus NVIDIA graphics cards. Do you support SLI integration? What OS do you program for? You see, it's not as simple as you think. There are a lot of decisions that have to be made during that time, and those costs could easily increase depending on the audience that you're going for. Now look, I'm a PC gamer myself, but I have to admit, the PC gaming side, well, they want performance, they want options, and when they don't get it, they'll be one of the first to bring it up. Console development, in the most part, is easier due to the knowns at hand. As for the cost that I mentioned before, is that not worth the cost in that case? Brian continues on. First-party publishers are increasingly becoming an unnecessary and costly partner in the creation of games. Platforms are just as well known for their restrictive practices as they are for their massive hits, and the cost both to the consumer and the platform holder continues to rise. I take actual issue with that. First-party publishers are also some of the only ones who will have a game actually come to light because they are willing to have exclusivity for a game that is worth their time and money. Or did someone forget that Bayonetta 2, a candidate for Game of the Year in several publications' eyes, in fact it was TechRaptor's Game of the Year, wouldn't have been created without Nintendo stepping in as a publisher? In fact, first-party publisher. That sounds like Nintendo now, doesn't it? Like, literally, it's bread and butter. It's competitive advantage. Well, yes, you can argue that it would exist on a service as you would allude to later on. You say restrictive. I say competitive. Offer people a product that they want. Offer people a reason to go for your service and console. Sure, you can argue that it would exist on a service otherwise, but here's the thing. How does the service change that? You still have to publish on Nintendo's service, so what's the difference? That's why Nintendo has always been a competitor. Their first-party content. Play their games on their console. It drives the quality of their products up because with their weaker third-party support over the years, that's what they've relied on. And that's what has gotten games like Hyrule Warriors and Bayonetta 2 into the limelight. You see, that's what's always missed about the first-party publisher. The fact of the matter is that you need something to drive people towards your service or your console. That service doesn't actually make a difference here. You need something to bring people in, something to draw their attention. Mario Kart 8, Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U, Bloodborne, Sunset Overdrive. All these are specific console exclusives right now that would make people want to buy that console. Bloodborne is a great example. A lot of people indicated that the PS4 wasn't worth it up until Bloodborne. That's the competitive advantage, and that's a good thing. It drives people to create better products. It drives people to create better services. Why is that a major problem? That's why Nintendo has always been a competitor in this market, this first-party content. Play their games on their console or their service. It drives the quality of their products up because with their weaker third-party support over the years, that's what they've relied on. You see, that's the thing about this statement. It's easy to say in the background, but when you think about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It'd be great if I could play Bloodborne on the Wii U, or the Bloodborne on the PC, or Bloodborne on the Xbox One, but that's not how competition works. You offer a service, you make it better than the others, and people will flock to you, regardless of the publishing practices. Brian goes on to write, one can assume, one can hope, that after 3 straight years of losing money, because Nintendo misjudged the gaming audience and the design of the Wii U, the Nintendo is once more reconsidering how it should sell games. I hate this. I hate this argument, I hate this argument, I hate this argument, I hate this argument. Why? I hate that he links to an article which indicates that the last year they made a profit. He omits that fact, and while yes, it's a problem that they lost 3 straight years of money, he forgets the current outlook of the last year looked rather good. Games like Mario Kart 8 brought the Wii U back into relevance with its great launch. You see, that's what people always forget about Nintendo. They always forget that they are not just looking for the current year. They are patient. There's a reason why they hold on to all that cash they've earned. There's a reason why they're so methodical with what they do, because they are the industry planners more than anything else. Remember how the GameCube couldn't keep up? Remember how the Wii was a joke? Remember how the 3DS was a gimmick and wouldn't sell well against the better hardware in the Vita? People always forget that even though Nintendo makes mistakes at times, they seem to have done pretty well for themselves in the end. Do you hear about Nintendo cutting jobs that often? Now, no, Nintendo of Europe is the last one that cut the jobs in 2014, but for the American and Japanese branches, they've been relatively untouched. Meanwhile, those who were in the industry at the time Nintendo was, Atari, Konami, Sega, how are they all doing in the video game atmosphere and market? Needless to say, Nintendo knows what the hell they are doing. They are patient. Brian writes, Nintendo has long shown an ability to think outside the box when approaching the game industry and its long-term ups and downs. When the NES was released to stores with no interest in game consoles anymore, Nintendo included a robot and called the console a toy. When Nintendo saw it was being outpaced by the graphics and processor chip war going on in the games industry in 2006, it headed out into the blue ocean with an approachable, casual, massively successful console, the Wii. Brian, you just made my point for me. I just said that Nintendo knows exactly what they're doing, just like you just said they know what they're doing. So tell me this, why are you so interested in Nintendo doing something completely different from their normal plans? They've proven it over and over again. So what's the difference here? Why are you taking such issue with the way that they're going forward? But I also want to go on a tangent here, because let's talk about toys for a second. Thinking outside the box, I wonder if there's equivalent to the robot that was introduced recently that shows Nintendo's outside the box thinking and has shown such a demand that their supply hasn't kept up. Oh right, Amiibos. And the funny thing is that this was pre-planned. Note the fact that the Wii U hardware had the technology to read the Amiibos already in its design, like they had planned for a future use of it. Imagine that, forward thinking from Nintendo. Brian writes, for Nintendo to succeed and to help free the video game industry from the shackles of console segregation, the NX should be a service, not an expensive box. What that solution is, streaming to televisions, cable boxes, or other devices, platform-centric operating systems on a computer, etc., remains to be seen. That's what it comes down to, isn't it, Mr. Crecente? This isn't just about Nintendo. This is about a perception of the video game industry, where it's going, where it's heading, and playing off fears of that. Look, it is not Nintendo's job to take the bullet and free the video game industry from consoles, these horrible, horrible consoles, just because we'd like it to. The fact of the matter is Nintendo's business model has heavily relied on console exclusives, the very exclusives in which have created the franchises we know and love today. Now, that could be in a service form, of course. Now, while they can live off that service, I'd ask you why they'd abandon it now of all times, especially when given the look of their competition. Sure, they won't have the numbers like the PS4 and Xbox One have, but that's the point, they don't need to. You don't have to be the top dog in the industry on every level, being a solid second works just as well, especially if you don't have to sacrifice your own assets to get there. They have a fan base that may be more loyal than any other console, especially when you take into account the games that they offer. Tell me, Mr. Crecente, how would a service provide them with the ability to market several of their new technologies as Amiibos? Give that technology away, hope that TVs now have RFID built in them, or whatever service that they provide? They get rid of an entire market there, and that's a little bit of a problem considering the demand for it. Brian finishes off the article by saying, but it was Nintendo that helped create today's concept of game publishing, forced platform exclusivity and royalties, and it would be fitting for Nintendo to be the one that kills it and the console too. Which in the last of fairy tales and happy endings, that would be a lovely ending to kill the monster that console gaming has apparently become. That Nintendo has created the beast itself, that for the sake of all video gaming everywhere, they need to take it down. Except, Mr. Crecente, this isn't a fairy tale. This is real life. Nintendo has lived on their innovation, and so-called weaknesses you've pointed out throughout this article can easily be flipped to strengths. In fact, a lot of the points have easily counterable points, or plain incorrect assumptions made. The fact of the matter is this, Nintendo is Nintendo. Business-wise, they are some of the most clever people on the planet, and give themselves room to fail. The Virtual Boy being a prime example. They could afford the failure on a project or two, but they always bounced back. Why? because Nintendo never panics. They stay the course, they keep on track, and in almost every case it works. And they've been a force in the console market since the 80s, and that's not stopping anytime soon. Now, I want to finish this off with this. Unlike other opinion pieces I've read, I think that Mr. Crecente has a concern for the industry. I think he's seeing certain practices, certain problems with the industry that he's trying to solve, and I can understand that. The fact of the matter is, the industry is in a little bit of trouble in some senses. Costs to produce are really, really high. Quality has gone out the window, and with the rise of mobile, a lot of people are going away from the console and the PC portions. I mean, hell, look at Konami. But the thing is that that shouldn't dictate the opinion in question, and especially for Nintendo. Nintendo is the console maker. Nintendo has been the bread and butter of the console industry for a while now, and there's not going to stop here. Now, the thing is that his argument actually makes a little bit more sense for another organization, Microsoft. Microsoft makes a lot of sense in terms of Windows 10 and integration, in terms of some of the technology that they're bringing. It makes a lot of sense for Microsoft to look at that more than Nintendo at this point, given the assets and given what they've had. But in the end, I can understand the concern for the industry, and I thank him for, being concerned with it. He obviously has some passion for the industry in question. But unfortunately, Nintendo, they're going to be here for a while in terms of the consoles. Once again, this is Sean Joy thanking you for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, you probably should. There's some more content coming that you guys will probably enjoy. If you haven't seen the pre-orders video, take a look, and if you want to go check out my channel, that would be appreciated. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you guys next time.